The Nikon D200 is known for its color, but how unique is it? A lot of people praise its color down in the comments, but how many of you actually shoot JPEG? Because this is the only way that you'll be able to see the decisions made by its sensor. Wanting to find this out for myself, I switched to JPEG and RAW for my shooting mode, and the result was a little bit different than I thought. In this video, I'm going to compare my in-camera shots with my edits. There's a few questions I have to ask myself. Are the images usable straight out of camera? Is there actually a large difference between the two? And how does either one print? Is there a big difference there? And if you enjoyed the look of my photos, at the end, I'll also show you how I get them. But before we get into it, I don't want to assume that everyone knows what a JPEG is versus RAW. For the JPEG, it is a fully processed image. So whatever settings you have in your camera are completely burnt in, and there's not much that you can do after hitting that shutter. So if you need better exposure, better white balance, or even some form of a crop, you might be out of luck if you don't do everything right in that moment. And it's often seen as the easy or beginner mode. RAW is a unprocessed exposure, meaning that the file is much larger than a JPEG. But with that, it allows you to save photos from the dead, whether they are overexposed or underexposed based off of the sensor and camera that you're using. White balance, I honestly toy with. It doesn't even seem like it's a factor when I'm using a RAW image. And then cropping is also based off of the megapixels, so it's kind of a give or take how much the RAW affects that, but it does play as a factor for how much you can punch into your image after in post. This is seen as professional, it is the industry standard, and typically if you're doing jobs, you're most likely going to be shooting in RAW. Starting with my favorite, the Paul Store. For this image, when it comes to color, it's spot on for the vibe or the understanding that I wanted. I feel like the exposure was a little darker, so the colors feel a little bit more muted, but I think that's the exposure. I wouldn't 100% go into say it being a wrong color rendition. But for these being more pop colors, being more personality driven because of the way that they're painted and things like that, I think that this was really, really good when I'm comparing the JPEG and the RAW. Not much difference in that category. So when we step into contrast, that same thing when it comes to exposure is the difference. It being a little bit darker than needed, it makes the shadows more muddy and the piece just a little bit more drab. But once again, these are things that I can control in the camera that are avoidable, excuse me. So it's hard to fault this on the D200. For realism, I think that this image is a little bit too saturated. Yes, it is darkened by the exposure, but the color just feels a little bit too strong. So even though my airy raw photo isn't 100% how it was, I feel like it's a little bit closer to what I was looking at in that moment. Second, I'd say is the fan favorite photo from my last video, the geese. Talking about color for this one, I think that my edit knocks this out of the park. Whether it's realistic or not realistic, I don't know. But the RAW does much, much, much better because lightening up that water in the middle ground makes the image so much more blocky or broken up when it comes to the imagery. The JPEG makes it a little bit darker, therefore making everything more mid-tone or muddy or not stand out as much. But in this same way, the background feels like it falls so much farther back when everything is brightened up, which is still good because like I said, it's making those playing fields of 3 different levels, but a give and a take in a way. When it comes to contrast, or at least how the shadows were developed, I feel like it being darker again, maybe exposure, maybe partly contrast, it takes away some of the detail that was in that red building in the back. And I think that it was also a big player once you change the settings back in RAW. When it comes to realism, I feel like this image is far more realistic than my RAW. The JPEG captures the moment much better because of the plants, the water. You don't see all that naturally. It's not all bright in that way. It's not all see-through or clear in the way that I constructed the image. Realism versus art is where things cross a little bit. And that's all I have for example. So let's move over to the computer so I can show you how I got some of this stuff. Looking at this Paul picture, here is the basics hidden, but of course we still have the curved tones under. But as you can see, my curved tones, they make the image far more punchy. This strengthens the darker tones and makes the brighters or mid-tones a little bit brighter. That's why the S-curve is in the way that it is. I made sure that the deepest of blacks aren't represented very much. They are not black, but a more charcoal. And then also for the highlights, they are not completely white, they are brought down. That is the little bit of space that you're seeing up here. And also why you don't see it fully represented as 255. It is 245. So with the curved tones and that going into the temperature, naturally I'm going to keep this a little bit warmer, but try to keep it realistic. Exposure, bump it up somewhat. So like I said, for this particular image, it was just a little bit darker than I wanted. So its exposure is a bit higher than normal because it's always a 0.5 for me typically. Contrast is brought down so that those shadows aren't so dark and you can see some type of detail within it. Highlights are brought down to, once again, not be so bright and make a flatter image similar to film. But that is the two factors other than crop that is a part of this image. For example, here goes a far more drastic image because I just don't like the super cool tones. It's not for me, and it shows the example right there of the raw images. The raw, you can do practically anything you want with the photo. If you enjoyed this video, the editing in it, please remember to leave a like. It'll help me out so much. And now we have the hype button. So if you are on mobile, please hit that button within the first 7 days. It'll help us grow a lot faster. Thank you so much for watching, y'all. I am out. Peace.